Welcome to Higher Intelligence, Smart Takes on AI for the next generation campus. I'm JC Bonilla, EdTech Executive, Data Scientist Educator. Each week we cut through the noise and decode what really matters for your institutions. This means AI explained for higher ed. This week, there's two stories that landed like they belong in the same conversation. But do they? OpenAI shipped the most capable visual AI tool ever built. At the same time, Google CEO walked onto the stage and told the world that 3/4 of his company's new code is now written by machines, AI agents. So, one story is about what AI can see. The other story is about what AI can do. Together, there's a signal about where the workforce is heading, and we've been talking about that, whether it's your campus, whether it's for your students, whether it's for institutions, and how you're preparing about this. So today I'm going to go into those two stories, but then I'm also going to go into a brief because the stories raise an obvious question. What separates organizations that actually are capturing the value from AI from the ones that are stuck buying licenses, buying instances, and waiting for clarity? I got a framework for you, and I hope that this is going to be one of those episodes that really move the needle for you. Two stories, one brief. Let's go. For story number one, let's start with a visual, because what just happened here is not an incremental update. It's actually a category shift. On your screens, you are seeing perhaps one of the most interesting ways to look at vision. ChatGPT Images 2.0. It is a core innovation that isn't about resolution or speed. It is significantly improved, but the core innovation is architectural. The model reasons before it generates. Let me explain this, because this is a different way to look into visual models. Every AI image model before this release worked in a specific way. You described, you prompt, and the model guesses the pixels, which is basically what it creates, the visual components of an image, and churns out the output. Sometimes it is great. Sometimes the hands have 6 fingers. Sometimes the word coffee is misspelled with 3 F's and only one E. The model doesn't really plan. It just kind of generates and hopes as it goes that this is the vision, the image that you wanted to see. ChatGPT Image 2 does something very different. It uses chain of thought, which is the same way reasoning capabilities that is powering language models now translate these to visuals. What does that mean? It plans composition, it checks spatial relationships, it verifies text accuracy, text accuracy, before it produces the single pixel. That's not a performance trick, it's actually a fundamental process for producing fantastic, top-notch visuals. Now, the results are measurable because when you start thinking about character construction across Latin script, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Hindi, Bengali, 99% of the characters are with the accuracy that is expected. Many of us who have been doing AI and computer vision and visuals, we've been seeing that this is where we start seeing the legible text inside graphic. It's horrible, but this problem has now been solved. That has been something that for the past 3 years we've been trying to fix and improve. The wall is now gone, and we have incredible alignment between graphics and text. The model also runs a 4K resolution and generates images roughly twice as fast as its predecessors. Now, it is native to GPT-4o, a conversation, not a separate tool, not a separate interface. In other words, you describe, you refine, you iterate, all within the same chat. So what does that mean? For higher education, for institutions, your marketing departments, communications offices, instructional designers, there's a tool now that requires no professional designer, no dedicated creative workflow that can handle with a single conversation by someone with zero design background, the output that professionalizes the message you wanted to do. The cost of good visuals content really has dropped to zero. And the institutions who are basically thinking about how do I use this, the ship has sailed. The question is, what does your creative production workflow look like now? And what are the skills that you should be hiring? So my friends, story number one, GPT Image 2 thinks before it renders. Every other model guesses and generates. This is a radical departure from the architecture that we see in vision and in vision models, and the difference separates this tool from a capability. It has widened the gap. Let's move into story number 2. Story number 2 has actually 2 announcements, and I'm going to try to combine them. Just yesterday, Google at the Google Cloud Next conference had an incredible announcement dropped by its CEO, Sundar Pichai. Pichai announced that 75% of all the new code in Google is now AI generated and then reviewed by engineers. This is not co-written. This is not assisted. Generated and then reviewed, approved, edited, and shipped by humans. Let me say this again. 75% of all new code, it's being done by machines. Humans reviewed, approved, edited, and shipped. To understand how this is moving, in 2024, a statement like this was made, 25%. Last fall, 50%. We're talking about it in 6 months. We've been seeing a 25% jump and increase. At this pace, we're not talking about AI as a productivity add-on for engineers. We're actually talking about a structural role change where engineers are becoming reviewers, orchestrators at a layer on top of the AI output. I mean, for us in the software industry, for you who are listening, this is a significant shift in how we think about the skills and the process of doing engineering and code. Secondly, also within the Google family, we saw a really interesting partnership that took place at the University of Houston. University of Houston partnered with Google to deploy Gemini for education and NotebookLM for every student, every faculty member, every staff member. This was an institutional-wide mandate, not a pilot. Everybody gets it. With a specific data sovereignty guarantee, like the research and intellectual property, the student data never leaves the university ecosystem and never is used to train AI models. We're talking about 140 faculty researchers, 14 different colleges, $70 million in active research, more than 140 AI courses and programs coming. Every student having access to the top line Gemini 3.0 models, about 100 runs, unlimited Gemini 2.5. I mean, this is a university that is saying, hello, I am here to say that every graduate of my institution has the AI proficiency on day one of their careers. So what does that mean? And why is this important and how these two stories are related? Google, the most important software company in the world, just told us the engineering workflow is going to start looking different, right? AI generates and the human reviews and orchestrates. That is a job description that did not exist 3 years ago. And now today also, we're here at the University of Houston, just decided and just rolled out that they will produce the graduates who know how to do that job. You see how the two stories come together? And that's what institutional commitment to AI looks like. Not a task force, not a policy, not a committee, a decision or deployment or a guaranteed. The institution competing for the best students in 2028 are looking at the University of Houston move as a baseline, not an example. So Google's engineers are now reviewing and doing orchestration. The University of Houston just committed to producing graduates who know exactly what that means. And campuses around the world, institutions around the world have not made that progress and that decision in many places. Yet, the workforce is changing upon us. This is why I want to switch from these two stories to an actual brief, a mini lecture of sort, in which I like to give the perspective that what I've been seeing in my travels, my conversations, and this evolution that we're carrying through AI. The two stories, there's one thread in them, right? These tools are getting better, obviously, faster, more accessible. But the gap between what AI can do and what more institutions are actually achieving, that gap is becoming wider. In other words, what we start seeing is that where the technology is at and where the practice is at, that delta, it's gigantic and growing day by day. So the technology is not the problem. The organizations are, but specifically the design within the organizations. So today's brief is all about that. And I want to leave you with somewhat of a framework, understanding the difference between the organizations that are capturing real value from AI, because some of them are, to the ones that are stuck in this idea of a pilot purgatory. POCs, task forces, AI on institutions, on campuses, on teams, and going nowhere. Are you ready for it? Okay, let's give you a framework thinking about what is happening really here, because most of the discourse around AI in enterprise, specifically in higher education, the sector that I operate in, it's either too optimistic or too vague, but nothing fantastic. Perhaps, whether you're in higher education or not, this is the same story that your organization and your team is actually saying today. The data tells us that it's actually very specific, and the pattern that separates winners from laggers is not about technology. As I told you, it's about organizational design. Okay? So, concept number one, the divide that is already forming. We're starting to see the rise of individual AI versus institutional AI. Specifically, as individuals are sophisticated and growing, we see them ahead of the curve. You may have them at this lonely AI user, knows how to prompt. She maybe has access to his own personal ChatGPT account, or you may even be paying for it. Faster prompts, generic models. Does that sound familiar? What you should also be familiar is that this individual is excelling and you're getting the rep of being a really good user. The institutional AI in how the learning is being passed to the academic institution, to the marketing team, to the organization, that is not happening. And the divide, it's the difference between individual AI, how that does not equal to institutional AI. This is basically data from McKinsey. 88% of organizations are reporting that there is at least one function that uses AI. We can say then that AI is seen everywhere. But only 1% of business leaders within this McKinsey data set say that their rollouts are mature. More than 2/3 of the functions have AI, but only 1% use AI with maturity. That's definitely a lagger and a delta between practice and generalizability and, of course, optimization. But what we're also seeing is within this 1%, there's significant productivity gains, specifically in groups of marketing. The standard AI index is demonstrating that the productivity gain is translating to 72% on marketing integrated teams. That's a significant difference, and is basically separating the haves and the have-nots. For my second point, I'd like to talk to you about positive and negative data. In data science, the field that I represent, we often learn about training models from things that they do not work. So, negative data, in this case, let me tell you about 3 mistakes that I am seeing and we're seeing across the partners, the institutions, and the advice that we give. And this stems from the idea that 88% of the AI participation is only seeing 1% of the maturity. And what is the flip looking like? Okay? So mistake number 1 is that we're giving licenses to people instead of infrastructure. For 20 years, the SaaS self-service model told by IT was very simple. Give people access and they will figure it out. Look, that model does not work. That model worked for the productivity tools, but with AI, it's creating catastrophic problem failures. Why? Because AI is about creating value linked to the organization, linked to the proprietary data that the institution, that the team has, and the operative logic that the team has. So what does that mean? It means your workflows in your team, the workflows in your companies. So a generic model, a generic prompt doesn't cut it. What we're starting to see is that there's a layer of intelligence that requires these to go somewhere else. Give the keys, but give the capability and the infrastructure to take it next level. The second thing that we're seeing is that many people who are failing are seeing AI as a cost reduction tool. You know what that means? It means that, it's going to reduce headcount. I'm going to save hours. The claims of efficiency will be reported to the board. This is not the AI strategy of the winners. This is not working. The accounting exercise that is happening here is just basically putting AI with a custom. The organizations who are winning are not using adoption, they're being transformed. And the way this takes place is to look at organizational design and reinventing oneself. Stanford's data shows productivity gains from 14 to 26% in customer support and software development and 72% in marketing teams. That's not a throughput number or just an efficiency. That's actually a radical different way to organize. And you know what happens and how that gets done? When you ask their leaders, what do you want to do? They don't say cost reduction. A chief revenue officer will say, I need more revenue. A VP of enrollment will say, I need more students and revenue. A CEO would say, it's not about controlling cost, it's about generating revenue. The aim at revenue growth, the aim at growth itself, this is where it's at. And this is basically the outcomes the AI needs to bring to you. Last but not least, in this point, the difference and the mistake that we see that you start with the strategy instead of a result. I've been seeing way too many AI task force steering committees, another policy document, my gosh, especially in higher education. This is kind of how we're organizing and standing up a strategy. Let me tell you that the best organizations do not do that. They start with one pain point, one objective, a problem, a very expensive problem, and they stay on it and they try to fix it. And this is basically where the AI strategy stems. One workflow that gets rebuilt, one signal that it's used to create an end-to-end agentic workflow, And that is the proof that you need to scale. And that proof creates momentum in ways that strategy documents will never do. The SaaS models that we have today kind of get out of the way mindset, whereas the AI models today say get in the way. Very, very, very different approach in how we should be thinking about what companies are doing or should be doing. As promised, in data science, we look at negative data and positive data. What leaders are really doing and how they're raising the floor for the entire organization, not the ceiling for the top 20%. What does that mean? Here are the AI tools for you. The top 10% of the most sophisticated AI forward individuals. That's a playbook that does not raise the organizational capability. What we know is that institutional systems, the AI forward institutions, are raising the floor for the middle 90%, for the 90% in the middle. Best companies make their best experienced employees capables, but they do bring the floor. There's three examples that I actually want to ramp up here. Discuss here. There's three examples I want to discuss here. One comes from Ramp, a fintech organization that decided not to give subscriptions, ChatGPT or Claude type of things, to their employees. What they did actually is they created their own AI system, it's called Glass, that allowed the organization to rethink how they will organize and work and support their business model. Again, it's not about the access, it's about the infrastructure. Example number 2 is about AY, specifically with professional services with 130,000 employees. And this is an example of rollout, not a soft rollout, not a POC, but a radical and important decision to roll out the entire AI practice against accuracy compliance for all of them at once. That was not a pilot, no cohort, no 12-month POC, but a full commitment to the entire workflows. And this is basically how good AI gets released. Well, last but not least, how we start thinking about Google, right? We already mentioned that 75% of the internal usage, right, in terms of software, is being done by machines. What is an important point that happens also with the Google philosophy as described by their CEO? Pichai said, for every $1 spent on AI, we are investing $5 on people. 5-to-1 ratio. And how is that actually being invested? For every $1 in AI, $5 goes on training, workflow redesign, change management. AI does not just change the workflows faster, right? It actually making a structural change, but those structural changes are managed, maintained, and sustained by people. So it's not an abandonment of the human, but actually a doubling down on what they need to be successful. So my friends, let's put it all together. The math is not complicated. 88% of usage in AI, 1% mature, and a ton of promise in terms of benefit and outcomes to be won. And what we're seeing through these examples is the tools are not the barriers. If anything, the tools and technology is the easiest part. The barrier, it's us, the organizations, the teams. How we start thinking about bringing AI, the benefits that it perceives, to us, the teams, organizations. It's not about cost reduction. It's about rethinking the outcomes that it'll bring to us. Here's the challenge to you as I sign off today. Do not leave this episode and schedule an AI meeting. Leave this episode and go find your signal. The one problem that is difficult, the one problem that you and your institution have been trying to solve, and go at it and stay on it. Throw technology at it. Throw AI at it, right? The one thing you already know how to predict is a bad outcome, right? For a student, for a staff member, for a workflow, for an applicant, for a business outcome. So then ask, what would it look like for you to respond to that signal within 24 hours? not for one student, one segment, but all your students. That is your proof of concept. That's where institutional AI starts, not at the boardroom, but in the data. I'm JC Bonilla. This is Higher Intelligence. See you next week. Thanks for listening to Higher Intelligence. This show is part of the Enrollify network, home to the largest collection of podcasts in higher education. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. You can find more podcasts, webinars, videos, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe to get new content sent directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the AI agent platform for higher education. Learn more at element451.com.